The NHL season is underway with some rookie debuts and familiar faces in new places. How did they all fare? All that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everyone, and thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers. I'm here each and every Friday with Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. You can find us on YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com. You can win $300 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. Some fun, crazy action in the first week of hockey so far, Gil. Are you enjoying the season thus far?
I am very happy that hockey is back. We've got the real thing, and let the 82-game grind begin.
Yes, and with the grind comes, of course, the injury announcements coming through, people leaving the game early, just kind of a mess. And we, of course, have our first controversial incidents of the season as well. And we've already seen Jonathan Drouin going to get a hearing, perhaps a suspension. What can you tell us about that, Gil, given you're on the other side of the fence there?
Yeah, well, it was in the last minute or so of the game against the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Drouin gave a little cross-check to the head or the neck of an opposing player, so he's going to be having a hearing in front of the Department of Player Safety at some point on Friday afternoon. And I would guess we're looking at a 1 or 2 game suspension at this point.
Yeah, I would guess that as well, but can't start that too early, I guess, these days. We, of course, are going to be talking a lot about the rookies making their NHL debuts, whether it's now or coming down the pike, and how they're doing so far. And I think, obviously we've only played 1 or 2 games per team. There are no trends here. There are no judgments to be made here whatsoever. Very interesting though, we've been talking a lot about the Montreal Canadiens and how they have a huge opportunity to take a big step forward this year. And one of the reasons for that is one of their strongest rookies, Ivan Demidov. He's got 1 assist so far and has been playing very well overall, I would say. But the top rookie scorer so far in the NHL is not him. It's nobody else but somebody else from the Montreal Canadiens, and Oliver Kapanen. He's got 2 goals in 2 games thus far. So good for him to be atop the score sheet amongst rookies to start the season.
He's on an 82 goal pace. I don't think he'll keep it up, but he's on an 82 goal a season pace. Look out, Wayne Gretzky and Alex Ovechkin, right?
Right. But I do think, the one thing that I will say is that you can glean from this about the Montreal Canadiens and what they've been doing with really doing an excellent job of folding in rookies and younger players, to the point where obviously Cole Caulfield he's young, but he's not in rookie young player territory anymore. He's in the middle ground right now, where he's kind of part of this wave, and I think leading the wave in a lot of ways of this kind of younger generation of Canadiens players that I think are going to make this team a very difficult one to deal with in the long term. Can they make a cup run this year? I don't think so. But will they make the playoffs and make a run at it and be a lot of fun? Absolutely. And their rookies are going to be a big part of that.
Absolutely. And that developing young players is a skill, and the organizations that can do it are at a big advantage because of the cap ramifications. You got players playing on ELCs. You can, hold on to some of your superstars or bring in a big free agent because you've got the cap room. And it if you're constantly replenishing the talent pool from within, that is a big advantage. That look, from an Islanders perspective, for example, that's one of the reasons Lou Lamoriello isn't here anymore, because he
Right.
could not draft and develop effectively.
Right. We're going to get to your Islanders rookies momentarily, but I want to continue that because the Washington Capitals are another team that is known for drafting and developing very well, and especially so on the developing side of things, where I think that, you know, a lot of people expected this bubble to burst with the Capitals, where they would hit rock bottom after kind of the heyday of their cup run. And, you know, Ovi's getting older. He can't do it on his own, but they developed so well. And Ryan Leonard is a huge part of that this season. He's played one game so far. He's been on the third line on that right wing there, which is the perfect place to get him going on this team. Like, third line minutes, third line competition is exactly the right way to build his confidence and utilize the tremendous skill base that he has. You know, I watched him for years on the development team stand out there. One of my favorite players. You know, he played 9 regular season games last year, so that's why he's still a rookie. But we had, you know, an additional 8 games in the playoffs last year to watch him. And, you know, he only got 1 goal in that time, which was an empty netter and an assist. But still, like, that experience is going to help him a lot this season.
No doubt. And starting him on the third line, think about it. Your third line is usually a checking line. There's not as much pressure to produce offensively. And because you're the checking line, you're kind of playing sound fundamental hockey and then moving from there. Like, anything more than the basics becomes more of a bonus. And I think, you know, that's a good mindset for a young player. You put them in a position where this is hockey. This is what you've learned to do. Start with that, and then you can build from there. And I think it's a smart way to sort of gradually get someone integrated into life in the NHL.
Yeah, and Hendricks up here is his center, and I've seen him play for years, and just a stable center, a really good guy to put him out there with. And Anthony Beauvillier, who's like a veteran, and I think Leonard and Beauvillier are a good combination offensively in terms of playmaking.
Yeah, I think that is a smart line trio right there, and you've got the veteran in Beauvillier who's been there and done that. And I think also you would have sort of internal leadership within that trio, so that on the ice, you have almost like an assistant coach.
Exactly. I like it. I really like that for the Caps quite a bit, much to my personal chagrin. But, you know, if I'm a Caps fan, I am thrilled with how that is being set up there. Now, of course, you have 2 rookies that are going to stand out on your team, one on the forward side, one on the blue line side of things. But of course, we got to start with Matthew Schaefer making his NHL debut. How's he doing so far?
I'll tell you, I was very pleasantly surprised. His skating is outstanding. His vision on the ice is really good. He hustles. He does come back and play defense. Does he need a little work on the physical aspects of the game? Yes, but what 18-year-old doesn't at this point? So he's going to make his share of rookie mistakes, but the talent is undeniable. He gave the Islanders about 18 solid minutes, had an assist, and became the youngest defenseman in NHL history to score a point in his NHL debut.
Yeah, that's great. That is really great. And yeah, I think, you know, on the blue line side of things, starting that young is a huge uphill battle. It really is, because defensemen as a rule take longer to develop. So I think, you know, throwing a guy into the fire like that at 18 is really, I think it takes a special guy to be able to do that. I think Schaefer's going to be okay, but I think honestly, like, being on the New York Islanders is probably a good spot for him to be able to make those mistakes and learn from them.
It probably is. And, you know, look, he's a very mature kid for 18. He's been through a lot in his life. Losing his mother a year ago to cancer. And he has handled the pressure, the spotlight, and all of those things exceptionally well. I've been impressed with his maturity from day one.
Yeah, absolutely. Just what a tremendous kid. Now, Maxim Shabanov, obviously a different path to the NHL, getting signed out of the KHL. What have you seen from him?
He scored a goal in his NHL debut that showed some really good hand-eye coordination. The big concern about Shabanov is size. And, you know, he's listed at 5'9", like a
generous, though.
Yes, that's with his skates on probably. But, you know, I think the skill is there. The question is, how long does it take him to make the adjustment to the North American style, the narrower rink, and can he handle the physicality at his size?
Yeah, I think that's a good question to ask. And, you know, we'll see how it goes over the next couple of months and how he settles into the NHL style of play here. We've got a couple of more guys we want to talk about who ironically played each other in a game already. So we'll get into the Blues and Wild top rookies, as well as some guys who haven't played yet, and why. We're going to do that coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I've built parlays to increase my odds. I've tried player props, and I've even followed the live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. So whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. If your first $5 bet hits, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Again, FanDuel.com to get started today.
We hinted at a couple of rookies who played against each other. That is, of course, the St. Louis Blues, who got blanked pretty badly by the Minnesota Wild. And let's start with Jimmy Snuggerud in St. Louis on the losing side of that equation here. I think, you know, he was a -1 in that game, but the whole team was not great. So that is what it is. But what's interesting is that he did spend some time on the top line on that team, and then definitely got dropped to the third line at some point. Now, of course, they were going to shuffle lines because they were behind and they were going to make adjustments. But like, what do you think about putting a guy like Jimmy Snuggerud, who is a strong prospect and again, very successful as a development team, but like thrusting him into the top line role for a team like the Blues?
You know, it's a gamble. I think it really is. And how mature the player is and how the coaching staff handles it goes a long way to determining whether it'll work. You know, you start him on the first line. By the end of the game, you mentioned he drops down to the third line. Is that going to hurt his confidence? Is that going to upset him? How does the coaching staff handle him, and how does he handle that demotion? If he's mature enough, he realizes, okay, we're losing 3-0 here. They're going to mix.
That's just what happens, right?
To get a spark.
Exactly.
And it doesn't matter who's on the first line, whoever it is, they're going to make, you know, changes. If the kid is old enough to handle that and mature enough to handle that, no problem. But some 18-year-olds or 19-year-olds are not.
Right. And I think, you know, again, the Blues are, I would say, similar to the Islanders in the sense that, you know, there's an expectation of, winning and, wanting to be successful, but there isn't as much of a spotlight on those teams as there are, in other cities like a Toronto or or the Rangers or, I think it is a really good place to develop as a player in St. Louis. I think there's some good things that are happening with that team. We saw some success last season that, Snuggerud could now be a part of. Moving forward. So I do think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for him to get really strong minutes, get opportunities to learn a lot this season. And so I'm very much looking forward to seeing what he does with the Blues this season. On the other side of that game was Ze'ev Buium, who was on the second pairing for the Minnesota Wilds. I think the second pairing is exactly where he needs to be on that team. And I think it'll be really good for him. We got to see him a little bit where he had, it was a mixed bag last season at the end. And we saw that, it's not going to be all sunshine and roses for him. And he's not going to have a super easy path. But I think that he's going to be a huge part of this top four blue line for the Wild for a long time.
Yeah, he is. And look, the thing about most rookies, it's a process. It's a learning process.
Yeah.
And part of the learning process is you go from being clearly the most talented player on the ice, or one of them, to, oh my gosh, these guys are bigger, they're faster, they're stronger than I am, and I have less time to do the things I wanted to do on the ice. And the quicker they adjust to that and figure out the counter move to that, that's how much quicker they become successful at the NHL level. Some players do it quickly, some players take more time, and some players never make that adjustment.
Yeah, and I think, that's fair. And I do think Buium is in the best possible position to succeed. I think like being on a pairing with Jared Spurgeon is going to be really good for him as far as development goes. And Buium will be able to play his game because Spurgeon is really solid defensively, right? So I think it's a really good opportunity for him there. Very much looking forward to it. There are some guys, though, who are highly touted rookies who have not made their debut. And in fact, they sat in the press box for their team's opening game, the San Jose Sharks, which, by the way, how did, oh my God. Anyway, that game, but that's an aside to this whole situation. But they chose to sit Michael Misa and Sam Dickinson for that game. Now, I think there are two reasons why. Number one, did they win their spots on the roster? Yes. Did they win spots in the lineup? Maybe, maybe not. So I think there's a question there about who deserved to get those spots for opening night. There's also the fact that they were playing the Vegas Golden Knights.
Right.
And maybe you don't want to throw them into that big a fire on their first game.
Yeah. And look, we have seen the Sharks in the past pace rookie players where they won't play the second game of a back-to-back, or they'll play 2 out of every 3 games, so that there's a big difference in the physical pounding that you take in an 82-game NHL season as compared to juniors, as compared to certainly college hockey. So it's an adjustment in that respect of keeping your body healthy, of recovering from one game and preparing for the next. So you can ease them in that respect. And, with a guy like Misa, for example, you've got the 9 games you could play them, and then you have to send them back or keep them.
Right.
So maybe you want to extend that time period a little bit also could be a factor.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair strategy, and it's one I'll talk about a little bit with some other rookies who didn't start moving forward. But again, with Misa in particular, as a center, you're looking at the centers of the Vegas Golden Knights. Do you want to throw him in there against Eichel, Carlson, Tomas Hertl, or Colton Sissons? I don't think so. I really don't. Not for game one. I think you got to work up to that a little bit. And I think they're being smart about it for sure. So, I think it's an interesting strategy, and it's one that the Philadelphia Flyers are using as well with their rookies in Jet Luchenko. And I think, with Jet Luchenko, the Flyers played the Florida Panthers in their first on the road. So I think that it was a good thing to sit him and say, watch this game, watch what the Florida Panthers do, watch what we do against them. And I think they could be, doing the slow burn thing with him and potentially send him back. And, the situation with Jet Luchenko is that he's probably too good to go back to junior, and his team Guelph is very bad, and they don't want to send him to a bad team in junior. If it was a good team, they would absolutely think about it, that could make a long run in the playoffs there. But Guelph is just not good. So they're kind of stuck in this. They're going to do the slow burn and play him, every 3 games until they figure out what to do with him, or World Juniors camps are about to start. And here we are. Right. So I think that's part of it.
Yeah, and it's a strategy. And again, you have to know the player, you have to know the situation. And with rookies, sometimes you want to ease them in. You don't want to put them in the deep end and say, can you swim? You want to give them a couple of lessons first. You want to put them in shallow water first. So I understand why, if you're facing the Panthers or you're facing the Golden Knights, that's not how you want game 1 to go.
Right. And, I questioned the decision on Nikita Grabenkin on the Flyer side of things. I think he could handle it. He's a little bit older, and he's like a dynamic player with a strong net presence. And that's what you got to do against Bobrovsky and net, who's very good with the stick net front. I think that it would have been an interesting challenge to have more than one Flyers guy who could do that out there in the same game against the Panthers. So I would hope to see at least him much sooner in the lineup. But I think that there was probably some hesitancy on brand new head coach Rick Tockett's part in terms of putting guys like that in against the defending Cup champs on the road. And there's something to that.
There is something to it, and hopefully, from a Flyers perspective, they will make the right decisions about how to gradually bring these kids along.
Yeah. All right. Well, there are also some veteran players who are in new costumes this year out on the ice. We're going to talk about some of them and how they looked in different colors coming up next. All right. I think, there's 2 different old faces, new places kind of approaches here. There's the top player that's in a new place, and then there's the I can't picture this guy in this other jersey kind of thing. And so let's start with Mitch Marner, who's obviously the biggest fish in this whole changing teams free agency thing we had this past off season. And they have played 2 games, the Vegas Golden Knights. So he's got 2 assists so far. He's on that top line with Eichel and Barbashev. I mean, could not be set up for success any better, right?
Yeah, that's not a bad line. Maybe one of the top 10 lines in the whole league. So, yeah, I mean, maybe even top 5. So, not bad at all. 2 assists. What is he, +4? Is it?
Something like that. Yeah.
So, he's off to a solid start. Point-a-game player. Again, 2 games. Not a trend yet, but
Nope.
You get the feeling that I'm not worried about Mitch Marner's productivity on this line and with this team.
Yeah, and the big knock on him has always been playoff related. So regular season Mitch Marner, let's go if you're a Vegas fan, right?
Talk to me in late April when the critics always seem to come out for Mitch Marner.
Correct. I think one of the other, I would say it was an important move, but less touted, was Keandre Miller signing in Carolina. And I think he's got a 2-goal game to start off with, first off, which love that. But I just think there was just this weird burden for him in New York. And with, I think the way that Laviolette towards the end of his tenure there was scrambling so much, he was not doing K'Andre Miller any favors. And I think this fresh start under Rod Brind'Amour is going to help him out a lot.
Yeah, I think Brind'Amour will be a very good coach for Miller. And there is a certain stability, a certain disciplined style of play. And I think
the
Miller
system will work to his favor.
Yeah, will benefit from that.
Yeah. And then I would say one of the other bigger moves, only because the drama around it was so long, like John Gibson on the trade block for what seemed like decades at a certain point, finally winds up in Detroit. And not so good for his first start.
Yeah, as far as debuts go, this was one, right? I mean,
yes,
it wasn't pretty. Gives up, 5 goals in 37 minutes or so. It was, when you have a goals against average above 8, you did not have a good game. But look, it's one game in a long season. His goals against average will not stay that high.
It shouldn't. And I think, the goaltending in Detroit has been a little bit of a weak link there. Cam Talbot is fine. I'm bummed out that Alex Lyon is not with them anymore. I think he was really good for Detroit, but this is their duo that they're going with. And I think, it does take some time for goaltenders to learn how to play like behind a different blue line and a different defensive structure. So I do expect some adjustment, variance here, as far as giving him the benefit of the doubt. And every goalie has bad games like this every now and again. So I'm not worried about John Gibson, but it's certainly not a good look, especially when this was the huge debut of this centennial for the Detroit Red Wings, and to have a clunker of a game like that right after was probably not great for the fans.
Yeah, not the way you want to start the season, but John Gibson is a veteran. He knows what it takes to win in the NHL, and I think he'll be fine. Right.
Now, I alluded to a guy looks very weird in a different jersey. Jonathan Toews is that. I watched a video of his introduction in Winnipeg. And of course, like the crowd was electric because, this is him coming home. And I think, to see Jonathan Toews back out on the ice after, of course, missing a couple of years because of battling medical issues that prevented him from playing. The fact that he's just playing hockey again is kind of a miracle in and of itself.
Yeah, it's great to see him back on the ice. You really questioned whether or not he would ever play again. And having the sort of homecoming is a great story. It's heartwarming. But does it look strange to see him out there in that uniform? Absolutely.
Right. So, I'll be interested to see what they do with him as far as ice time management, right? Because he's older. He hasn't played. This is something they're going to have to do very delicately and, see where he's at and manage those minutes, manage those situations specifically. And so that will take some time for sure. I did think, speaking of other guys that are, in new places, JT Miller, right? That the fact that they named him Rangers captain is crazy to me.
But yeah, I wasn't expecting that for sure. But there he is. And the Rangers bounced back from a disappointing opener and did better in their second game. They went from being shut out to shutting somebody out.
Yeah. Now, Buffalo Sabres, so grain of salt, but it's early goings for all these teams here. And of course, Shesterkin was great in that game, but I think how JT Miller manages this year with the New York Rangers is going to be one of the most interesting storylines in the East.
It's going to be interesting, and I think there's a lot of pressure on him right now.
Yeah, there is, especially after how the Rangers just haven't lived up to expectations. Now he's captain after spending so many years out in Vancouver. Like, That's a big, big burden. And I'm curious to see how Miller handles the pressure on and off the ice.
Yeah, and it's the Rangers' 100th anniversary season as well, so that adds even more pressure and more spotlight to the entire situation. And, the Rangers are one of those teams that they could either surprise everyone in a good way because there is talent on that roster, or they could have another implosion like they did last year and end up on the outside looking in. So,
who's to say, honestly?
but him being the captain, his face is going to be, whether they succeed or not, his name and his image is going to be associated with that even more.
Yeah, no, it's good that Miller got on the board, in this game against Buffalo. It was actually a really good net front tip there. So, against the aforementioned Alex Lyon. But, I think he's going to have to score. I think in order to really, get going and establishing himself as the leader on this team.
Yeah, and he's off to a pretty decent start. So let's see where it goes. Again, early in the season, no trends yet. But
no trends, no judgments.
No judgment. Well, okay, a little bit of judgment, but yeah. But so far, he's getting the job done.
All right, that will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening and or watching. Of course, Gil will be back on Monday to talk to hosts from around the Locked On NHL channel about what's going on with their teams. We will be back next Friday to have more of a full week of action to look back on and look at some of those trends. So looking forward to seeing you next Friday. Thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen today. For your next listen, you can check out Locked On NHL Game Night, which is on this very channel. It's every game, every night until that Stanley Cup champion is crowned. You can get local analysis on a national scale. You can find it, of course, here on YouTube or wherever you find your podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.